Shalom and welcome to the 2017 Homeschool Family Conference. And in this session, we're going to talk about grades, records, and transcripts. I think these are some of the top questions we receive from our customers and on our Facebook wall. And so we're going to address some of those most popular questions today and try to help you have confidence as you homeschool your children. My name is Elliot, and I'm the creator and founder of homeschoolingtorah.com. You know, I never realized 20 years ago that I was going to own a curriculum company or write homeschooling curriculum for other families. I had no idea. I just knew that I had a really adorable little boy who I so much didn't want to send off to school. I couldn't imagine him leaving me after only 5 years. It wasn't enough time for me to teach him everything that I felt that God wanted me to teach him. And I talked to my husband, who was in college at that time to be a public school teacher himself. And I remember saying, honey, I don't want to send my kids to public school. And we didn't have the money for Christian school, and we weren't really completely sold that it was any better. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We just weren't sure what to do. We prayed about it, and my husband said, well, I'll let you try it for a year. So this was back when he was only 1 or 2 years old. And so I remember thinking, how can I prove to my husband that my child in kindergarten is learning so much more than anyone in a public school? Well, I went to conferences, I read books, I of course chose the perfect curriculum, at least that's what I felt. In fact, I probably picked like 10 curriculums. I had so many materials in the house for that first year, and I loved teaching kindergarten to my son. Only thing is he didn't learn to read very quickly, and by the end of kindergarten, even though we had faithfully done homeschooling that whole year and used all sorts of things by that point, he still couldn't read. And we moved to a new state. We started first grade, and by the time we had gone through 9 weeks of school, he still couldn't read. And I was starting to panic. My husband will never believe that my child is learning. Obviously, they're doing something better in the schools than I'm doing here at home. I don't know what my problem is, but I'm obviously a total dunce at this homeschooling thing. We were getting really frustrated. We took 2 weeks off of school, and during that 2 weeks time, he suddenly was reading the words on the screen on television commercials. Just read them out loud, and I went, honey, he read that. He's never seen that commercial before. And suddenly he could read. The light bulb just went off. And one of the things that I learned, and I heard this first during those years from a woman named Joyce Herzog, and I'm going to be posting a link to her blog or her website below. But one of the things that she said that really stuck with me is that children do not learn according to curriculum publishers' scope and sequence. Your child was born given gifts by Jehovah, his creator, but those don't necessarily match the curriculum company's expectations. So the mom's expectations may be here, the curriculum company's expectations may be here, and everything is neat and tidy. Everything is organized and linear, and it just gradually progresses. And the child, on the other hand, learns like this. One day they learn a lot, and another day they go down, and then they learn a lot, and they go down. And it's these plateaus, steps and plateaus, and steps and plateaus. And that doesn't match any curriculum company, not our curriculum company, not any curriculum company. And that was vividly illustrated to me with our firstborn son, who it felt like he was plateauing and even regressing in reading, and then suddenly in the course of 2 weeks went huge jump and could read almost everything. Ended up being a fantastic speller. Today, of course, he's an adult, and he's a computer programmer and an illustrator, artist, musician. He loves to read, he loves to write, all of those things that I never dreamed he would ever be able to do. And it just kind of made me sit back and think and say, wait a second, our kids are not cookie cutters. No child is the same. Having said that, one of the most popular questions we get is, what do I say to my friends and family who are really not real happy with our decision to homeschool? On top of that, if you are Torah observant, you are already facing opposition and a lot of questions from everyone around you. You're odd, you're peculiar, as the scriptures say. you're set apart, but it isn't fun. Everyone is judging you and critiquing you, and you are starting to feel like you have no support, and you're even wondering if you are capable of doing this because everyone thinks you're not. And I'm here to tell you, you are. Jehovah put those children in your home because he thought you and your husband, if you're married, would be the best parents for your children. No others. I mean, your children are going to look like you. They're going to act like you. They're going to like the things you like. They're going to dislike the things you dislike. You will be surprised how similar they will be. And that's intentional. God did that on purpose. He wants you to reproduce after your kind. And that's just such a freeing concept. He put them there. He wants you to be their parent, and he thinks you're the best teacher they have available. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that there aren't weak areas in your own education. There aren't areas that you feel a little bit not as capable as you could be. And we can help you with those things, but I want you to think about the fact that maybe he doesn't want you to be capable in those things. Are we all cookie cutters? For instance, I love to read. I've always loved to read. I learned to read before I went to kindergarten. I think it's partly maybe because my parents loved to read and they read to me a lot, and I just love languages. I love words, and I love letters. I love everything about it. But another thing that happened is that in my first grade year, I was really sick. I had rheumatic fever. I missed a lot of school. And I was home a lot and bored and weak, so I couldn't play outside and do things like that. I would play a little bit with maybe those little Fisher-Price little people that were popular in the late 70s and early 80s. And that doesn't mean that I didn't like to imagine and create things, but that's what happened. I would start to imagine new worlds, which eventually led to wanting to write about them and make up plays and make my friends and siblings and parents play in my plays and have costumes. And you can see I had a vivid imagination, but I also read a lot. We didn't have a television, or we did, but we didn't have it available to us very much. My parents were pretty strict about TV. And so we had a vivid imagination, and I loved to read, and I loved to write, and I loved music. And you can see that because I was a sick child often, that the two kind of go together. I had time, and it was the way he built me. It isn't the way he built you. Your childhood probably looks very different from my childhood. But can you see, looking back, that that's exactly what he wanted your childhood to look like? Maybe you went through some really hard times. Maybe you had abusive situations or terrible home life. But he still put you in those situations for a reason. It says in 1 Corinthians that we went through hard times and tribulations so that we could comfort others. And basically, everything that he has given us is so that we can pour our lives into others and help them. No matter if it's a good situation or a bad situation that we've been in, all of it is useful so that we can teach others. So I want to give you the courage and the confidence that you can teach your children, and while you should maybe beef up some of the areas of deficit that you have, you can also rest in the fact that maybe your strengths will be your children's strengths and your weaknesses might be their weaknesses, and that is okay. That is the way you were made and he intended you to be. Now, areas of weakness such as math or reading, I want you to realize that your 5-year-old child doesn't know very much about the world yet compared to what you do and your years of wisdom and understanding and experience. So you can learn it along with them. And if you have a question in an area, you can ask for help. Our contact form is at the top of our website. Please feel free to use it. But don't feel that you have to be years and years and years ahead of your child. You have to only be one lesson ahead of them, or even on the same lesson. Learn it together, discover together. And if you're weak in an area, then, oh well, be weak in that area together. Okay, so let's talk about grades and how to know how to give grades to your children, because this is a really common thing that we get asked as well. For instance, one mother writes, I have a 9-year-old son. Is he learning enough? How do I know if he's learning enough? How do I know if he's learning the right things? Okay, let's talk about that last section. The right things. What defines the right things? Well, because I'm a curriculum writer, I guess I have a look at it from another side, and I want you to think about what I do. I didn't intend to be a curriculum writer. You can read our story on our website, but I didn't know this is where God was going to take me. I was only compiling things for my own children's education. Ended up that financially we needed me to use those things that I had compiled, and I started to say, well, I need to make sure that my kids are learning the right things in this curriculum I'm making for them. So I love to read, as I said. So I went back into the 1800s, the 1700s, and even before to see how were children educated back then. What is the tradition, the path that we are on, and why do we teach our kids the way that we do now? And again, my husband is a public school teacher, and I was married to him when he went through his college education and learning to be a teacher. I was also an education major. So we have studied a lot about history of education in this world. And one thing I've noticed is that while we all agree that children should have certain abilities by the time they reach the age of adulthood, they also are being trained towards a career so that they can provide for their families, so that women can be good wives and mothers. Those are the basic things that people need. So going to college is a relatively new thing, incredibly relatively new. College is the way most Americans and most Europeans train their children to have a job, but it is not the only way to train our children to have a job. Okay, so the right things to be learned, basically what people do is they say, what do the colleges want my kids to learn? And then they back it up and they say, well, kids go to school when they're 4 or 5 years old and they go until they're 18, so let's divide up all of this information, this body of facts, into all these neat and tidy packages, 180 school days, times how many years there are. You make a big grid, you put it all in, and you say, okay, on this day we're going to teach this, and on this day we're going to teach that, and make sure we review these things here. And it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, just because on Monday morning you're supposed to study fractions does not mean your child is ready to learn fractions on Monday morning. It doesn't mean they have any grasp or understanding or concrete working with fractions on a Monday morning. And in a school, they have a million ways that they can try to teach the kids. They talk about learning visually, learning auditory learning. They talk about communication skills and writing skills. They learn about tactile learning and touching, and then they have behavior problems and things that they have to work with at the same time to help kids learn. All of this has to go together, but you as a mom, step back from it for a minute, because you have freedom. You are the mom in a quiet home or a loud home, whatever, but it's your home. It's your little kingdom. You know your kids best. And just because the curriculum says that you have to teach fractions on Monday morning, you might say, my child's not ready for that yet. What we're going to do is we're first going to go into the kitchen and we're going to work with some fractions while we make a cake together. And then we're going to go outside and we're going to maybe we're going to build a small playhouse for the child, and they're going to learn how to use a ruler, and they're going to measure and cut, and maybe they've always wanted to ride a bike for a mile, and we're going to learn what a half mile is and a quarter mile. And you see how that real life experiences, you can put those into your kids, and you can know one thing: the curriculum is going to come back to fractions again. And every math curriculum, they come back to them again and again and again and again. And if you don't have them this year, you'll get it next year. It's not a big deal. You don't have to learn it with a worksheet. You can learn it with real life experience. But as the mom, you can look at the worksheet and kind of get a gist of the things that your kid should be learning. Should be. And who's to say it has to be learned at age 9? You know, let's say a child is learning fractions. Let's go to age 7. Let's say a child is being introduced to fractions at age 7 and they're not ready. What if you were to come back to that at age 12? Think of 5 years now have gone by, and you want your child to learn fractions, but now they have all of this education, all of this life experience that has happened to them in that amount of time. New vocabulary in their language, just all kinds of things. What took your child 6 weeks at the age of 7 to learn might take your child 1 day or less to learn at the age of 12. So let's talk about being efficient with our time. Is it better to spend 6 weeks on something or 1 day? Sometimes it just makes more sense to wait. And we're going to get back to that a little bit as we talk about specific subjects. What you do want to give your child. In the age of the internet where you can look things up, facts are easy to come by. What you do want to give your child is a love of learning, and most of all, a love of the scriptures. The verse that we come back to over and over and over again is, all scripture has been given by inspiration of God, has been breathed out by him, and it is profitable, it is useful for. And then it lists all of the things here, and I've got that verse in your handout for you, but it is saying that your child will be fully equipped to every good work. So if you take that verse, then that means that the love of the scriptures, the love and the knowledge of his word, his scriptures that were breathed out by him, is the most important thing for your child to learn. And if they have a love for that, you will find that a love for learning all other things comes with it. I hope you can go back to day one and learn our principles of godly parenting from the book, from the Bible, and how we talk about how his witnesses, the heavens and the earth, and everything around us are given to us. As we study them, we are given a love and desire to serve and worship our Creator. So the two of love of learning and a love of scripture go together. So how do you give them this love of learning? What if they don't have it right now? The number one thing you need to do every day is give them the Word of God. That's why I say, for you as a mom, no Bible, no breakfast. You need to read it yourself. You can't give something that you don't know. If you don't know the Bible very well, then learn it. Don't spend time studying homeschooling how-to books. Don't spend time at watching television. Spend time reading the Bible. You can get through the Bible very quickly, within a month or 2 or 3 if you want to. If you want to be more methodical about it, but you can read through it every single year, and that's a good thing. I do advise. Make sure you know it yourself. But then for your kids, at breakfast time, let's give them the Torah. Let's give them the Bible. Let's give them the New Testament so that they can learn about Yeshua, their Messiah. Let's give it to them every single day so that they know it. You'll find your kids probably know it better than you do soon. The second thing you need to do is read to them. Read all sorts of books from the time they're a baby all the way through to adulthood. Be reading to them. Whether it's learning to read with expression and learning to hear how words should sound, but it's also having a common experience together as you travel to other parts of the world and other parts of time with your children through books. You will have a common knowledge of things together, lots of things to discuss together because you were there together as you read to them. Reading to them, even if they're not interested in learning yet, it gives them an excitement. I let my kids play and color, do Legos and stuff as they sit quietly on the floor while I read. Just me, but it's very, that way if a little boy is needing to move, so he's running somersaults on the floor while you read. It's amazing what they can still hear. A lot of times though, I just have them color or do Legos. Those are my 2 favorite things. Have your child, as they learn to read aloud to you. That helps you see how they're learning, but that's a lot slower, just a little bit every day. Have them copy the scripture. We're going to have a whole session on Copywork and why it's important, so I won't go too much in depth on that, but it's very important. Do it every single day. Math should be done every day. Why? Well, we talk about that in other sessions, and I can give you links below. In fact, I'll give you a link to our math video. But math is something that should be done every single day. And it's a skill that needs repetition, 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 repetition. But it doesn't have to be done with a pen and paper. It can be done in lots of creative ways. So please don't think you have to hand them the worksheet. The worksheet is more of an idea of the things that could be reviewed, the things that should be refreshed in their mind. But anyway, we've got other videos on that. Discover together. Talk about things that interest you. If you're not interested in becoming an academic person, going off to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, then maybe you want to become a mechanic or a house painter, or maybe you have a child that wants to be a physical therapist, or there's just a million different occupations. But discover together. I have a feeling that the things that you are interested will also interest your child. That's just how it seems to work. But if your child has an interest that's very different from yours, go with it. Discover it together. Find ways in your community to learn more about that. The library is a great place. Let your child just spend time playing. playing and imagining are fantastic things. Turn the television off, take away the devices and the electronic things, and just play. Old-fashioned stuff. That's one of the best things that your child can do. You can call it school, okay? In fact, I think it should be required. I think public schools should require it. Recess is so important, and they're coming to discover this, and they need physical activity as well, but they just need that time to imagine and be outside or up in their room imagining. That's so important for kids. And then most of all, just wait. If you're not sure if they're learning, if you're not sure how they're doing, just put yourself in check and say, just wait a year. Just wait. Okay? In a second, I'm going to talk about making journal notes about your children so you can come back to later and see that they've improved. But that's a really, if you feel stressed out and are wanting them to go faster, then make yourself instead journal about it and just wait. Remind yourself, wait. Your child, give them time to mature, time to grow up. Okay, let's talk about some things that you can do for actual grades. We're going to be very homeschooling Torah specific here, but you can apply this to other curriculum if you would like. In the early years, what kinds of things do you do to give them grades? And the purpose of grades is so, like a journal, so that you can see that your child is improving. Your child is measuring up to your expectations. So what are your expectations? Well, it depends on the subject. We'll get to that in a second. But your expectations of what should be done in that subject form an A grade. Having said that, are your expectations reasonable? That's why we were just going over the things that just because the state says that a child needs to know such and such by age 10 doesn't, and actually I don't think any states really have that specific unless you go into their school standards. But as far as homeschool requirements, it's not that specific. You don't have to go by their standards. So just because an expert somewhere in an office building said that the child should learn it by age 10 doesn't necessarily mean it must be learned at age 10. When they're in their early years, you want to see them learning to listen to you. If they can listen and pay attention, you are accomplishing so much. That is the main goal for the early years. Of course, obedience goes into that, but just learning to listen and pay attention, period, on all sorts of ideas and topics is really important. You need to be discussing things with them. Talking to your child and having them talk and discuss with you is extremely important. Observe your child and teach your child to observe the world around them. So you're basically, can you see you're going through the senses and you want them to learn to be proficient with their muscles and skills like that. So that's why we have them learn to hold a pencil, because it's a fine motor skill. So everything in the younger years is arranged around the five senses. They want to listen and pay attention, to observe, to use their senses to observe, to use their muscles, their big muscles and moving, and their small muscles and putting little Legos together and using pens and coloring in the lines. Things like that are things that you can be working on. Take notes with your child. If you see that they are struggling, I have a son right now who's 7 years old and is struggling a little bit with some speech issues. So we're learning to slow his speech down every day. And we're helping him to observe that, my speech may not be easy for someone else to understand. So you take notes and talk with your child about it. I had a son several years ago that was playing football and couldn't catch very well. And we found out that his right and his left brain weren't working in sync together. So we were able to do some activities together, but he was old enough that he could take charge of that. He thought it was really fun. Kids love those kinds of things, to analyze themselves. You take notes and let them take notes. As you get up into the middle years, I'm thinking 4th, 5th, 6th grade, 7th and 8th grade. In those years, now you're growing up a lot. And at this time, you're wanting them to practice with responsibility, to learn how to take some more initiative and to be responsible. At this point, you want to start to teach test-taking ability. We do not emphasize tests a lot in Homeschooling Torah because I'm just not a really big fan of just parroting out the information. It would be better for them to learn to write, to be able to explain things back to you. However, they're going to be thinking towards the high school years where they will be needing to take tests, maybe if they want to go to college. So you want to give them occasional tests. We have tests in math, we have tests in spelling. We don't have a lot of tests in some of the other subjects, but that doesn't mean that you can't test them. For instance, in science, we have a lot of vocabulary words. So one way that, while we may not have a written test, the test may be you asking them to define all of the vocabulary words to you that week, okay? Maybe you would do that in a written format, maybe you do that in an oral format. It would depend on what your child's abilities are, but it kind of gives them gives them an opportunity to start to be tested. But writing is a form of a test, and I would rather my kids made a notebooking page that shows what they've learned, or write a paragraph, or give a presentation, make a YouTube like what I'm doing right now, and let that be their testing. So is accuracy essential in the topic that you're discussing? Then grading is really important. So how do you know what an A is in math? If they missed 3 things, what grade is that? Well, I say take up how many questions there are. Let's say there were 25 questions on that math test, and usually it's not quite that neat and tidy, but we'll just use that for an example. And they missed 2, okay? So you take 23 are correct out of the 25. That forms a fraction, 23 over 25. You divide 23 by 25, and that gives you a percentage. If it's above a 90, that's an A in my book. Having said that, if they get a 100% on an accuracy-driven subject like math, because math should be accurate, spelling should be accurate, grammar should be accurate. You can say it's very objective. Yes, it's right. No, it's wrong. And if you're an engineer building a building and it's not accurate, the building will fall down. If you're a writer and your grammar is not good, you will not sell as much. And I'm just sitting here analyzing my sentence right now. Is my grammar good? I don't know. Anyway, so in an accuracy important subject like those, then you can be really subjective. And if they get a 100%, I think you should reward it really well. And that should be what they aim for. They should not be aiming for an A. They should be aiming for 100%. Having said that, we're humans, so an A is good. So I do 90 to 100 is an A. 80 to 90, 80, 89 is a B. In the 70s is a C. Anything below that, they don't know it. In fact, I don't think they know it very well on a C. I would do a lot of review. That doesn't mean that you should get discouraged. It just means that you need to revisit those subjects again. Maybe slow down. Maybe just give them some extra practice. Maybe make them do it over if it's math. Maybe do it the same problems but on the whiteboard the next week, so that it feels different. Maybe keep going on some things in math. If they're in 3rd or 4th grade, keep going. Don't fret too much about it. Work on your drills more than the worksheets. Drill it together. Drill it. Play games that are in the drilling section of your teacher's guide. But they're going to come back to it next year, and you will be surprised. But 1 year of maturing makes them go so much faster. I have found that for my kids, 3rd and 4th grade, especially about 4th grade, age 10 or so, maybe 9, they are struggling. They're struggling with their multiplication and their division. Ratios and fractions are way hard, but you come back to it. By the time they're 12, suddenly they're catching on. And it might be a different age for your kids, but you'll see the same amount of maturing no matter what ages they're having trouble. Okay. Are you teaching facts or are you teaching concepts? In history and in science, you're teaching more concepts than you are facts. I know that sounds funny for me to say that for science, but science is more about learning the vocabulary. Yes, you need to know the basic vocabulary of science, but after that, it's learning to think with the scientific method. You're learning to analyze. You're learning to discover. And so in those kinds of subjects, instead of having an objective test, I think it's better to have the notebooking pages that show what they've learned. Yes, memorize your dates and your timelines and your scripture verses. Those are important. But otherwise, why don't you have them put on a presentation of some sort, whether it's a notebooking page or writing something, or you know, ideas are in the curriculum, but you can make it bigger than this. Maybe make a physical. Let's say you're learning about longhouses and you make a longhouse, okay? So you can learn in a lot of other ways than testing. So what do you write down as a grade? Well, did they do a good job? Did they put effort into it? Even if it wasn't perfect, I'm not asking for perfection, but did they do it to the best of their ability with a good attitude? Then that's an A. If there's something lacking in their attitude or otherwise, then I would go down lower than that, okay? And having said that, Do you need to keep record of your grades? For the little young years, I don't think you should keep track of grades at all. I don't. Just go to the state requirements. If you have to have a certain number of days, then do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep track of grades. As you start to get into the middle years, you as the mom might want to practice keeping grades. If grandma's going to ask you how your children are doing, I guess you could give grades so that you can have an answer, but that's always shooting to the grade and to the grandmother. You as the mom, I think, just watch them and observe them and say, Grandma, they're doing great. You should see the project they put together this week. Or, Grandma, they're doing fantastic. We went on a walk this week and we found robin's eggs. And that would be better. And yeah, it's outside the box, but be confident. Stand up. You were the parent, okay? All right. Teach them to communicate. We are to be hearers of the word. That is one of the reasons faith comes, by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So teach them to read, teach them to write, and teach them to communicate God's truth to others. We talked about that last year in our conference, and you can find videos about that in our 2016 Homeschooling Family Conference. So, in some of the things you can keep a grade for if you want to. In Bible, I have our kids memorize the Bible verses. Otherwise, they're copying, they're making illustrations of what it means, and we're discussing, as you know. That's enough for me. In history, I have them memorizing dates and important people. We put things in their timeline book, and we make notebooking pages that we put, and so that notebooking page comes like a portfolio. That's their grade. It's not really a grade that I keep. It's something I can show to Grandma if she asks about it. Science is very similar, and I do review the vocabulary words each week. I don't stress about it. I actually don't give my kids a test in science. We just talk about it and review it. And kind of randomly say, okay, I'm going to go back to week 7. Do you remember what this is? Okay, on week 9, do you remember what this is? That's about as much grading as I do. Math, the 5th day of every week is a test. I give them a grade. If they get a 100%, I give them candy. It's to be a big deal. Otherwise, I just say A, B, or C. I don't write it down unless they're in high school, but that's me. In phonics, I don't have grades, but I do make sure that my children can read the word lists. And by read them, I mean without too much effort, not perfectly at first, but they need to be able to read it. And if not, I don't go on. Just because I'm in week 20 in math does not mean I have to be in week 20 in phonics. I can be in week 10 if that's the only place they are. Or I can put it away for another year, and that's okay. In grammar, there are occasional tests in the book. They are very occasional. Only a handful of them throughout the whole year. But as we do the diagramming, especially the diagramming, if their diagram looks like my diagram, I give them an A. And you can just randomly pick one day to do that, especially if it's not a day they're getting a new concept, usually towards the end of each week, around day 5 again. But it doesn't have to be done if your state doesn't require grades, that, unless they're in high school. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay, in writing, what you want is to see, what does the assignment want your child to focus on? Are you focusing on speaking to a particular audience? What is the curriculum wanting you to focus on? Are you focusing towards a specific audience? Are you learning to write a specific type of essay? Are you learning to outline and take notes? Then if your child is accomplishing that, I give my children A's. Having said that, the mechanics such as capitalization and spelling and punctuation, those are important, and so the older the child gets, the more they are towards adulthood, then the more heavily I grade for those things. But I certainly don't for the elementary years. I might show them their mistake, but I don't make a big deal about it. So you can see I'm not a heavy grader, and I don't think you should be either. For typing, you want to see that they're gaining speed and gaining accuracy, but realize that not all children are going to learn to type at the same ability levels. It's just a sign that God is directing them to different career paths. If they can basically be introduced to it and they hate it, then be done. If they love it and take to it, then really expect a lot from that child. For preschool, you don't need to grade your preschooler. Your preschooler is just in an age of discovery and learning. Require obedience and, like I said before, learning to pay attention to you, but otherwise encourage play and imagination. That's all you need for preschool. When someone asks, is your preschooler learning? do you really have to show a recitation of all of their ABCs and letters and, all their colors, and they can speak in French? And really, are we in a race? Are we competing? Is this a pride issue? No, that's not why God gave us preschoolers. I say, you know what? I am so blessed at the obedience of my child this week. They really learned to obey. You'll probably shock the listener and they'll be, oh, okay, that's not what I meant. But you don't get caught up into this competition. Okay, keeping records. For Homeschooling Torah members, you have a Together School Planner, and in your planner, next to your subjects, if you have something that you would like to give a grade on that day, or for math and spelling and such every week, just write it right in your planner. And until they are in 9th grade, that is sufficient. That planner should be kept, and you put it away at the end of every school year. It shows your attendance records and what you taught and the books you used, because it was your planner, and it will show your grades. If you want to kind of look through and see what did they get over the year, that way, because I'm expecting your kids are going to get A's most of the time, or you're going to slow down, right? Or stop that subject until they're older. So therefore, your kids are going to succeed, and you're going to constantly be able to say to your kids, they're an A and sometimes a B, but they really do great. And what is more important than keeping the grades in your Together School Planner are to keep the portfolios of their notebooking pages and their writing assignments, their copywork. Those things are much better to show other people what they have been learning. Those things should be kept. However, in high school, in the United States, you will have to have a transcript for what your child has learned. And so therefore, grades are important. For high school, I would keep a track of your records right in your planner, just like you did at any other age. But every 9 weeks, you need to average them up and transfer those grades onto a transcript. For their freshman 9th grade year, you might want to do this every 3 weeks until you get in the habit and you learn, and you can quickly catch any areas of weakness that your child is having. You should also keep a list of all books that your high school student has been reading, and you should keep lots and lots of writing samples. So if they do notebooking pages still, which mine do, then you would definitely keep those. Keep all research papers and literary research papers and anything like that. Definitely keep their copywork. Copywork is a great thing to put out at their high school graduation. You may want to schedule times with your high school student to meet together with them. Again, maybe every 9 weeks. Take them out to a nice restaurant and sit together and have a discussion, an encouraging discussion about their future. That's something that they will look forward to, and you will look forward to, and it kind of keeps you all on track throughout your 4 years of high school. Before I go on, I realized I forgot something. I have a list of books that do, at least through the 8th grade, list general things that your kids should know at each level. They don't all agree with each other, but they're generally pretty good. These are my favorites and the ones that I have here. And one of them is mine, and that was my effort to put up what a child should be learning and how you should be teaching them. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. It's in your handout. Okay, graduation requirements. How do you know when your high school student has graduated? Well, first, as I've said before, according to Romans 13, we are to be responsible to the higher powers. If there are legal homeschooling requirements for your state, then you should follow them. Make a list of what they are. You can go to homeschoollegaldefense.org, hslda.org, and you can get a list of legal requirements for your state. It's free. You just have to register, I think, give them your name and email address, and then they will give you those requirements. I do recommend becoming a member with them, but that's optional. I strongly recommend it. But anyway, for graduation requirements outside of those state requirements, which oftentimes involve government and history, and some math, then you need to put together your family's graduation requirements. For instance, do you want to require that your student copies the entire Torah before they graduate? That's fine. Do you want to require that they study these certain books that are on your shelf? Maybe you have a book on nutrition that is incredibly important to you, and you want to pass that information on to your children and grandchildren. Well, require it for graduation. Have a list, give them that list of requirements, and divide it out by the years so that they know what it is. When your child has fulfilled those requirements, whatever your school's requirements are, then they graduate. That's how all schools work. High school students graduate when they have fulfilled that school's requirements. Your school will not look like your local public schools, but you might want to go onto your local public schools website and see what their high school requirements are to give you a good baseline. But again, remember, you're putting in things like the Word of God that they probably won't put in. Copywork, character training, and chores and life skills. All of those things should be in there. And just your child knows that, you know what, if I finish these by age 16, I can graduate. If I'm 19 and a half, then oh well, so be it. That's when I graduate. Okay, on a transcript, I wanted to let you know that on our website, if you go to the blog and then click on the high school category, there are 2 documents or 2 articles especially that you'll want to see. One is the Quick Start Guide. That gives you an idea of how to start 9th grade. And then, but more importantly, there's one called Transcripts and Diplomas, and it gives you a document that you can, it's filled in already artificially as if a child has finished all these amazing things, but you can delete those out and put your own in, and it gives you a template to go from. And of course we have a diploma there that you can use for your children as well when they've accomplished those requirements. It has on that transcript hours. Each class in high school, in a public school situation, is usually given either 60 hours for 1 semester or 120 hours of classwork and homework for a full year. So 60 or 120, and I divided that out and it came out to basically about 20 minutes a day. So wait, did I say that right? No, I did not say that right. 40 minutes a day, half of a year would be 20 minutes, 40 minutes a day on each subject. So that's about right. That's about what it takes my son to work on Algebra 2. About 40 minutes. That's about, you know, maybe how long they would be spending on copywork and Bible reading, which would be their Bible subject. History, they're reading, you know, some pretty hefty stuff from Eusebius or this or that. And it's going to take about 40 minutes, maybe longer, but that's what I just put down as a rule for my kids. If it's an average, you know what, if your child is spending 2.5 hours a day on music, then you should put that on their transcript. So use my 40 minutes as a bit of a guide and give your child credit for the things that they excel in. And then if they're only spending 10 minutes a day on a subject, then you probably shouldn't be giving them a full year's credit. Now, let's see. A credit is basically 1 school year's worth of work, 40 minutes a day. And they're going to need, you can tell your kids, this is how many credits you need to graduate, but colleges think like this, so that will help them. As far as figuring out a grade point average, a GPA, well, if they did your expectations, they get an A. If they're just a little under, they get a B. If they're struggling, but you think that they've got a generally good introduction to it, that's a C. And otherwise, they need to take that course over. I wouldn't even put it on the transcript. I aim for my kids to get A's and B's. But every A is given 4 points. So this is a big math problem, and why I think you should go back to it every 3 to 9 weeks, okay? And so you don't have this massive math problem to do after 4 years, and you can't remember how they did. It's a really big mess to try to go through all your paperwork at that point. Don't ask me how I know this, all right? So 4 points for an A, 3 points for a B, 2 points for a C, and worse, if, you know, 0 would mean they didn't do the work at all. So you add up how many credits they got based on how much work they spent, how much time they spent on that subject. Then you put the 4 points or 3 points or 2 points for your grade point for that, and you multiply this together and then divide it by how many credits you had. Now I know I said that really quick. You can write to me on my website if you didn't get it or you need help. I'd be happy to help you with this. But again, please do see our transcript template so that you can see how we did it. Let's talk about dual enrollment real quick and advanced placement tests. Your local high school, if your child is going to be going off in a difficult, what I would call like science-based or math-based, or who knows, if they're going off to college and you feel that that college is not going to want them to come in because they're homeschooled. And sometimes, you know, to be honest, they don't think that we mothers are as objective as maybe a teacher that's not related to them might be. I can see their point. I'm not sure that's totally true, but I can see their point. So sometimes they like to see that your child has taken college level work and done well at it. And sometimes you want to know, is my child college ready? And so dual enrollment is a handy way for them to take a college class while they're still in high school at a reduced price. Around here, they run around $200 for a class. I've seen them online from like Liberty University, or lots of places that offer them to high school students that are homeschooled, and they run between $600 and $800 a class. So it depends on your budget. Advanced placement, usually you just pay for a test, but you have to be ready for that test, and the classes to get ready for the test are exorbitantly expensive. You can also get books if you want your child to study it on their own, but those advanced placement tests usually are offered a few times a year and run between $90 and $110 for the test. And that's not as bad as, financially, but the classes to prepare them they can be really hard. I wouldn't say that the homeschooling Torah classes are necessarily made to prepare your kids for an advanced placement test. I think if you are going to put your kids into advanced placement and have them take an exam, you should probably research either a good book that will prepare them if they are able to learn from a book that's a lot cheaper, or it's an area that you feel strong in and you can help them, or you can hire a tutor, or you can pay quite a bit of money for these courses. I would not necessarily, ours is meant more for a general education and not for advanced placement. Just being honest, you need to know that. Then your freshman year, you don't usually take too many tests like the ACT. You can take the pre-SAT if you'd like to see if your child is okay at tests. You might want to buy an achievement test sometime in the middle years, maybe from a company like the Bob Jones University Press, BJUP. They sell achievement tests that it gives it gives you a baseline to see how your kids are doing compared to all the other kids in the nation. Whether that matters to you or not, I wouldn't get too worked up about it. Some states do require this, by the way. But otherwise, it also lets you see if your child has the ability to fill in the little circles and do it in the amount of time prescribed. That's a skill that not all kids have, and maybe you want them to work on it, and maybe you don't care. It's not really something that we must have. I don't see it anywhere in the Bible that it says your children must be able to do a math test and get it done in 20 minutes. My son, who is 21, is very good at computer programming and very good at art and very good at music. Like I said, he's an excellent writer and a prolific reader, and he's a terrible test taker. So I don't know that it matters. He went into a career that he can take his college classes online. He doesn't even have to go to college. He did for 1 year, but otherwise he's been doing all of his classes online and doing very well at them without having to fill in the little bubbles. I have another son who's a really quick worker in all of his math. He's a quick thinker. He's quick in everything he does. He's not as artistic. And he wants to go into engineering. He's very hands-on, and he's a good test taker. He can get a test done in no time. So as you can see, I think he should go more maybe the typical college route, and he will probably do very well on his ACTs and SATs. He's getting ready to take them very soon. You need to take them by your junior year. If you want to try it out in the freshman or sophomore years, or just take achievement tests, that's fine. But they start to count in your junior year. And if you have a child that's going that way, you want to emphasize advanced math early, maybe even start it in 8th grade if they're going that way, because those tests are very strong in math, and they're also strong in English. And I would advise you to take our grammar, maybe take it twice. If your child can diagram everything in our grammar, they're going to do really, really well. They also need to do very well in writing essays. So take our writing curriculum and emphasize being able to write an essay, and then turn on a timer and see if your child can write an essay in 20 minutes. If your child can write a very good essay with good mechanics and good ability to do what the question said, and if you need help with this, again, send us an email. I'd love to help. I really would. So the essay writing, the English skills, the math skills, and then depending on what they want to do with their life, the social studies and so on, it's so frustrating sometimes to me that by the age of 13 or 14 or 15, our kids need to know what they want to do when they're 30. And I don't know what I want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to do everything. Again, we're going to have another session on helping your children learn what career is good for them. That's coming up next. But I want you to realize that your children don't have to be a cookie cutter. and they don't have to know it all. But if you need scholarships and such to help you pay for college, then you might have to play the game a little. I want to end with one thing that I hope is kind of how I started, and it's something that's a passion of my heart. If your child doesn't know what they want to do someday, and you don't know how to do all this grading, and you don't know how to know if they're learning, and you have all these questions, and this scariness, this doubt is starting to come over you, that's not shalom, that's not peace, then why don't you do some prayer and fasting for a few days? This was recommended to me by a dear friend, and she said, honey, why are you so worried about your son and what he's going to go off to college for? Have you prayed about it? Have you fasted together? And maybe it doesn't have to be a long fast. Maybe you just take a day or two. Maybe you only skip one meal, and during that mealtime you spend time in prayer on your faces before Jehovah, saying, please direct our path. We want to seek you. We want to seek your kingdom. We want to do what you want us to do. And ask him to guide you and give you wisdom, and know, because James says so, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally and does not upbraid them. He will give you the wisdom you ask, but you need to ask him. All right, so in summary, grades, records, and transcripts. You're the mom, you're the dad, you're the principal of your school, you are the parents that God gave those children to. Be confident. Say, this is what God has led us to teach our children, and this is what we will teach them. And don't listen to all of the naysayers and all of the people who are asking you questions. Be confident and say, we, together with his help, we will leap over a wall, as David says. We will have great success as we put our mind on his Torah and on loving his word and loving his creation and loving his world. We can do it. And I know you can. Now, if you have specific questions in the chat room, come and give them to me. Put a comment below the video. Come in best place if this is after the conference, and if I might not see your comment, just go to the contact form at the top of homeschoolingtorah.com and send us an email, and we would be so happy to help you out. Shalom.